How hard or easy is it to transition between voice directing and voice acting? I've been studying acting since I was pretty little. I grew up in London and went to the school, the Italia Conti School, which it's known for having Noel Coward attended. A lot of the Hogwarts kids went there, and they produce a lot of soap opera actors in the UK apparently. But I was pretty wee when I was going there, and then I went to the High School of Performing Arts in New York, which is the famed school, and then I went to a conservatory for classical theater in North Carolina. So I've always been doing that, and I've been told, you know, like I did well, and I always got into the program I wanted that was accepted a few people, but I was told a few times growing up that I would be a good director, and I never understood why. And I was like, are they dissing my acting? You know, like, oh, great personality, not that cute. But I ended up getting my first job in anime in recording studios at Southwind in North Carolina, in Wilmington, North Carolina. That's where I did Bubblegum Crisis and Crash, and then I did Police Spot. That's the Bubblegum universe. But I was hired to work in the studio because Randy Drew, who gave me my break, was a musician, and they were hiring actors to do these dubs. And they were like, well, we know how to do audio stuff, so we'll make them talk when this happens, and, you know, got ADR beats happening. We learned about that. But he didn't really speak actor, so even though I wasn't quite qualified to be the engineer, but I'd been playing with audio stuff my whole life, I got a job at the studio, and as per every job in the studio, you start by making coffee. I made such crap coffee that they moved me off that in a week. And I got to like in front of my computer. But he wanted me there to help him translate into actor. Because he'd be asking for something, not getting the performance, and then go, you know what I want, why aren't they doing it? So I would tell him something else, like, not all the time, I mean, he was the director, but I would help him translate into actor, and then that is how I got my transition to sort of getting into directing. He let me do some incidental stuff, and then I took over a show, and it was great. But going back and forth, I find the focus is very different. As an actor, you lose yourself in the role, and you have to trust the director, especially for dubbing. You don't see the whole thing. Unlike with Summer Wars, rarely do I get to see the entire project. So you have to trust the director to give you context and everything. Whoa, who's this guy? What is the power gen crystal stone thing? What? So the director has full scope of everything. The actor does not. It changes how you do stuff. There's a lot more responsibility as a director. It's harder. I think potentially it's more artistically rewarding. It's more emotionally stroking to be the actor, and people are like, oh, you were totally that guy. But it's really on the director to make that happen, I think. So good dubs, bad dubs. You can see actors do really great or really poor work. We all have. And it has more to do with if they were cast appropriately and if the director, you know, led them. But I find, just doing this movie, Mia and the Magoo, we had children, we had celebrities, and then we had a few voice actors. And most of the people I hired were people, I feel like a burp coming on, and I'm afraid to do it in the... I mean, I could. I did all the Michelangelo burp for Ninja Turtles, by the way. He would do a line, and then I would... But then when I get started, I'm like, oh, I got a better one coming up. And then the producer would be like, I've got to be throwing up. Carol Weissman. Anyway, who I totally owe that job to, because when I crashed the audition, she got my phone number before I left, and I wouldn't have been Leo without her. Thanks, Carol Weissman. Sorry about all the burping. When I, directing, working on Mia, I cast, most of the movie takes place in South America, so I wanted to cast people who were actually, you know, appropriate. I didn't want to just have voice actors being like, oh, I'm from down on. What? Down under? What am I, Australia? There were a lot of Mexicans in the outback. No, and they were mostly like not Mexican. They were like further south, Argentinian and stuff like that. We had some Colombian, Cuban. But I wanted to cast appropriately, so it was a lot of new people, and it really made me think differently about directing. It wasn't people I already had shorthand with. But directing's harder because the job is communicating, and you have to figure out how to communicate with each individual differently. You know, directing Whoopi Goldberg was not the same as directing an 11-year-old girl. And the 11-year-old girl and the 11-year-old boy were totally different. She was better if I let her do a whole run, like a whole page. She'd blast through it, and her sync was pretty surprisingly good. The boy, he was better when I did like line by line and craft each one. But you have to adapt to each thing. When you're an actor, you might have to figure out what the director means when they say this or that. But you know, you're not having to change your whole context of communication with each person coming in the booth. Also, it's longer days as a director. You're sitting in one place doing the whole thing over from different characters. But for an actor, you can pop in and out for an hour, up to 4. You know, go to another studio, do it again. Is that an answer or just like a rant? Okay. So I don't know which I yeah, it can be tricky sometimes when you start, but once you're in the swing, it's great. And I love, if I've been directing too much and feeling really responsible for the the future of an entire project, getting to be in the booth as an actor again is a relief, because I'm like, you can worry about how it sounds and what's going on. I'll just be. You can throw something at me and I'll react to it, but I don't have to worry about like, oh, bit depth, oh, the levels, oh, it's hitting the compressor too hard, oh, the proximity's off, oh, they keep popping the P's, which I'm